The proroguing of Parliament and the resulting lack of political debate in the House of Commons is disturbing to many Canadians, as protests held across the country last weekend showed. However, things such as international treaty negotiations continue whether or not MPs are gathered in Ottawa. And that includes the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement talks which resumed this week in Guadalajara, Mexico. ACTA, as it's called, will set new international guidelines for Internet use, especially how people upload and download things. Although the negotiations are being conducted in secret, leaked documents have shown that some extraordinary measures may be included in the treaty, measures aimed at curbing Internet piracy. But these measures also might hurt people who are using the web legally. Charlie Angus has been following the issue closely. He's the NDP MP for Timmins-James Bay, and we reached him at his home in Cobalt, Ontario.
Charlie Angus, before we get to your specific concerns, can you give us some background here? There have been some leaks around this treaty. What is believed to be contained in the ACTA at this point?
Well, the latest round of the Anti-Counterfeiting Treaty Agreement is now underway in Mexico, and it's been under a really heavy veil of secrecy, which is pretty odd. When the previous treaty on intellectual property, the WIPO treaty, was negotiated, it was very public. But this is very much, on the QT, strictly hush-hush. We've gotten a number of leaks that have come out that are very disturbing because we talk about counterfeiting, we're thinking about international counterfeiting gangs, and yet it seems that a lot of this is going to be focused on trying to put the digital genie back in the bottle of really blurring the distinctions between what individuals do at home and treating them as though they were a threat, copyright threat in terms of counterfeit infringement. So,
why is that? Who's driving this?
This has really been driven by the U.S. corporate lobby. There's been a lot of attempts over the last number of years to turn back the clock on what's happened in terms of people's digital access, movies, downloading, etc. And at the same time, there's been a lot of other push, I think, very from the grassroots in that to say we need to get some more progressive copyright, make sure artists are paid, but not treating average kids like they're criminals. And that's really where Canada is at the point. We are at the point of possibly coming forward with a good model for copyright, but this treaty, being behind closed doors, would actually undermine any domestic ability to set law and would actually, I think, from what I'm reading, seriously override fundamental Canadian rights.
Can you give me some specific concerns about what kind of impact you think it would have on individual Canadians?
Well, part of it is really opening the door for corporate interests to go after claims of potential infringement, and that doesn't necessarily mean commercial. You're not counterfeiting. It could be your kid downloading and trading some Jonas Brothers MP3s. So requiring the telecom, your cable company, to basically spy on what you're doing and give up information on your use. The issue of possible search and seizure of iPods and laptops at the border to allow them to search for what's on your hard drive or on your iPod. One of the most disturbing is this notion of a 3 strikes and you're out policy, so that if your kid downloads 2 MP3 files and then downloads a movie, and then you suddenly get told by your cable company that you're no longer allowed to use the internet. That has major implications in terms of privacy rights, in terms of process, and also if we're going to be moving forward in a 21st century economy, this kind of regressive policy would pose major stumbling blocks.
As I understand it, after that 3rd strike, your household would not be allowed to have internet services from any provider. Is that right?
Yeah, you would be persona non grata in the digital world. Well, people do their work, they do their banking, and the corporate copyright lobbyists, if they ever came out of the shadows and fessed up, would claim that there would be due process, but that's really highly unlikely. But the bigger issue here is this is not something that Peter Van Loan, the trade minister, or Stephen Harper has a mandate to do. We cannot be overriding Canadian domestic law in a closed-door set of meetings in Mexico.
But the government has said that the treaty will be subservient to any law passed within this country. You've already said you don't believe that. Why is that?
Well, the real problem is it's a pretty hollow claim to say that Canadian law will not be subservient to ACTA, but if we signed on international trade commitments before we've had a chance to develop the copyright laws that the government has promised would be done in public consultations, it's extremely unlikely that the government would then, having signed ACTA, turn around and tell their international partners that they're about to breach international obligations. So this has to be debated. It has to come out in public.
Other countries have come forward to say that they're uncomfortable with the provision you referred to, this 3 strikes, you're out position. Do you have any idea where the Canadian government stands on that?
The Canadian government has gone to ground. They're being very silent. I really think that as citizens find out about this, this treaty will get blown out of the water because it is so outrageous. I mean, if it was a legitimate process, it would be done in the eye of the public, but it's not.
Why do you think it's so secret?
It's secretive because it's really the U.S. corporate lobby trying to get their way. They know that there's not a democratically elected government in the world that would support some of these outrageous claims. So it's being done through trade treaty negotiations behind closed doors. One of the European activists said that the only response to this is the vampire solution, that as we expose these negotiations to daylight, the main players are going to start to melt away. And so that's my challenge. I've written a pretty comprehensive letter to Minister Van Loan saying the process has gone on for 3 years. You're getting now down to brass tacks. It's time to bring the treaty to the Canadian public and bring it to them. And if it's going to be a legitimate treaty, it has to be brought before any of these kind of backroom deals are made.
How has the proroguing of Parliament affected this?
Well, I'm very concerned that we have Minister Van Loan's officials sneaking around Mexico behind closed doors when us, the parliamentarians who were elected to ask questions of the government, are sitting outside the House of Commons. We need to be able to ask. This is what question period's for. I want to press Minister Van Loan. I want to find out the details. With a prorogued Parliament, we're not sure how far Canada will go in terms of finalizing some of the details of this agreement before parliamentarians have a chance to even comment.
Charlie Angus, thanks for talking with us.
Thank you very much. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Charlie Angus is the Member of Parliament for Timmins-James Bay. He was at his home in Cobalt, Ontario. We called Trade Minister Peter Van Loan for comment on this issue, but received no response.